when I look at a clock and the second has just changed and I glance at it. So I'm seeing the whole second, and that only happens in the single digit percentage of the time. Normally, when you look at a clock and the seconds, you're partway through a second. So you're like, oh, that's a second, right?
Right.
But when you catch it and you look at exactly the time a second just ended, that
Yeah.
second seems like a long time.
The one I ran into, so I have a clock in the bathroom that I can see through the shower stall, so I can make sure that if I wake up late and I've got to like make sure I make my first meeting of the day or something, like I can time myself. Otherwise, I'll take a 10-minute shower. I'm not above it. And I remember one time I looked at the clock and it was like 7:44, and I put my head down to do the shampoo, and I could not have done the shampoo. In my mind, there was no way I did the shampoo for very long. And when I lifted my head back up, it was 7:46, and I was like, what did I just black out in the shower? Was there a glitch in the matrix? Like, what's going on? But it's one of those things where when the clock doesn't have the seconds, I could have looked at the clock at 7:44:59 and
Yeah.
7:46:01, right? And like, to me, that's not 3 minutes haven't elapsed, right? So just weird random things like that.
Yeah, I also the one I think about a lot is because I was technically in a coma for like 3 or 4 days once, right? And it's
Oh my
people are
God.
like, "What's it like when you die?" And it's like, "Do you ever go to sleep?" Yeah, will you wake up in the morning? Yeah, it's just like that forever, but you never wake up in the morning, so it's nothing, right? Like, and that's what it was like being in a coma. Like, I wake up 3 days later, 4 days later, and I'm
Oh my
like,
God.
you're like you're 4 days out. And there are people who've been in comas for years, months, whatever. But like for 4 days, and I think to myself, I was like, well, I don't remember anything, so that is basically dead, right? Like, I wasn't dreaming. I don't remember anything from those 4 days.
Sure.
So that's why I kind of have like a calm, peaceful sort of opinion of like, yeah, the way you die might be really unappealing, but once you're dead, it's gonna be okay.
How did we go from shower clock to death is calming?
Dude, a lot of people die in the shower. Don't shower in a thunderstorm, people. Do you not know?
What?
Don't shower in a thunderstorm.
What does that have to do? Why does that matter?
Because if your house gets struck and you're in the shower, there's a good chance you can die. Well known fact.
Okay.
Don't shower in a thunderstorm.
Wild. I think I might be okay in my condo building, but okay. Good to know.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you should not do in the shower.
True. Welcome to Acceptance Criteria, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of how software gets made and how we can all do a better job together. My name is Kevin Thomas Euland, and across the chat from me is Andrew Greener. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. We're also here to get deeper on the human elements. I could go on for an eternity about people and how they think about the process of building complex systems. And I can't think of two better people to do that than Kevin and I.
And maybe you can come and be the third chair so it's not just us. If you've got a topic you'd like to come discuss or rant about, drop us a note and we'll see if we can get you on a future episode. And a quick reminder, whether this is your first episode or you've been listening for a while, we wouldn't say no to your going and dropping 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leaving us a nice review. And if you want to leave us a bad review, remember the name of the podcast is Critical Role. Also tell your friends if you like the show and that they should check it out. Some of the best podcasts out there go by word of mouth, and we'd much appreciate it. And a friendly reminder that we are always interested in hearing questions directly from you, our listeners, for our segment User Stories. If you've got a scenario you'd like help with, whether it's working with an engineering or product team member, trying to figure out how to solve an agile process problem, or you just can't understand why your favorite app updated everything and it's now terrible, we're here to talk it through with you. You can send those questions to acceptancepod@gmail.com or submit them on the Discord and the User Stories channel, and we might be able to help on a future episode. And we're happy to keep it anonymous so no one can trace it back to you if you end up shit-talking a coworker or something. On this week's show, we'll be getting into some recent news stories and talking about how they impact all of us. But before we get to all of that, let's take a short break and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. This is a segment we like to call Market Factors, where we talk about industry news stories and trends we're observing. Mostly, it's an excuse to rag on bad decisions and argue with each other whether some new piece of tech is worth it. So our first story is that Telegram founder Pavel Durov was arrested in France, and the French authorities were tracking down what's called CSAM, child sexual abuse material. It's such a gross topic, I don't even want to say it. And it's a thing that apparently spreads rampantly on Telegram because, for people who don't know, Telegram is a messaging app that encrypts all of its messages end to end in the actual applications. And so unless you're a member of the chat, you can't see what the messages are. And I can kind of understand Telegram's in the business of just providing a thing, but wouldn't have the same moderation ability because it's all encrypted. And that's really bad in this situation. So the charges are broken down into 4 categories of the Telegram founder being complicit in storing and distributing the CSAM content, facilitating drug trafficking and facilitating organized fraud and other illegal transactions. The second claim is that Telegram refuses to cooperate with law enforcement when they file a formal request for information or documents. The third charge is that there are cryptographic features that have not been formally declared to French authorities, and so the operation of these cryptographic features in France is considered illegal. And then he is accused of taking part in a criminal association with a view to committing a crime or an offense punishable by 5 or more years of imprisonment, as well as money laundering. And it's not totally clear that the indictment doesn't tell you what that criminal association or view to committing a crime. It's like intent to commit a crime, which I think in the US is closer to like conspiracy to commit a crime. And then money laundering, which, okay, everyone's doing money laundering these days. It's called Bitcoin. And it's created quite the uproar because, one, everyone likes Telegram and WhatsApp and all of these encrypted messaging solutions. Two, tech bros are freaking out at the idea of being held accountable for the outcomes of their technology. And 3, I think there's a tricky conversation here. The technology is designed to not have Telegram know what's going on in your chats. Therefore, how would Telegram possibly moderate this kind of stuff unless it would fundamentally break the like operating model of Telegram? Okay, Telegram puts a little monitoring bot in every chat. Well, then why is anyone using Telegram? And there's slippery slopes in both directions. All of the stuff that happens in Telegram that they're trying to clamp down on is horrifying. There is disgusting levels of child pornography and abuse and trafficking and terrible things being coordinated because they know they can do it end-to-end encrypted and not have law enforcement be aware of it. Fundamentally, Telegram is designed to do that. If law enforcement starts to say, okay, but you do have to figure out how to monitor and moderate all of that, people will just stop using it for those reasons and go to yet the next app that does all of this, to the point that, I don't know, my question is, can Telegram exist? Can Telegram provide what it's supposed to provide and yet be not let itself become a haven for all of this kind of stuff? And I go back and forth of like, yeah, if you live in Russia and you're gay, use Telegram to keep yourself safe from all of the horrible stuff that's going on in there. If you're in Saudi Arabia and a woman, like, yeah, there's legitimate cases where I don't want governments under like breaking into this kind of stuff, but then the side effect of that is child pornography and trafficking and a bunch of other gross stuff. So I don't know, can technology like this survive?
Yeah, I have a challenge with this one. So, and I think we should be clear too, right? Like he's been arrested. It's deemed that his technology is facilitating that versus he's not being accused of consciously being part of a.
The second charge seems to be that they are consciously choosing not to cooperate with law enforcement. But that's one of the ones where like I don't know, I'm not defending him. I'm not defending the horrible stuff that goes on in Telegram, but literally tell me the technical way that Telegram could cooperate, because isn't the whole point that if you're not in the chat, you don't get the decryption key and therefore you can't see what's going on? I don't like, this is what I'm saying. Fundamentally, maybe this is showing that Telegram as a business is not viable because I don't know how Telegram complies with the law.
Yeah, isn't it similar to was it Apple like 10, 15 years ago when the government were talking about like breaking
Yeah, to hack into the iPhone
to
so that
hack
you
into the
could,
iPhone
yeah,
and Apple
right,
were
without
playing
the pass key or the
right.
Face ID or whatever. Yeah.
It's a weird one for me too because I'm like I guess I'm kind of where you were by the end, right? It's somebody's doing something bad on an application, but then that application runs on somebody else's servers and that those servers are part of the internet. So like how far does the accountability chain go? Like can you actually argue like, well, it's actually the internet that should be policed properly? Like
Right.
going after Telegram is like, yeah, but Telegram just lives on the highway that is the internet. So why not hold those guys accountable too? So I have a challenge with this one because yeah, the alternative is basically giving up all of the features that allow us to be safe and feel safe on these channels. Unfortunately, here's the trifle, right? Is
Right.
he's Russian. So no offense to Russians, but
Right.
it's just one of those geolocations where we're constantly looking at the sort of cyber and so it's a weird tribal these days where would would TikTok be getting chased viciously by the US if it wasn't, the region of the world that they think it, the
Sure.
vast majority of the execs come from, and the so yeah, it's a weird trifle where I'm on the side of I'm on the side of Telegram, but then I'm also like, yeah, but it depends what kind of
Right.
Russian they are.
Well, and but also, like, there's part of the request which are, we're not asking you to, decrypt anything for us, but we have here evidence of these chats breaking the law, so you need to tell us who these phone numbers belong to, who these accounts belong to. And there's a degree of, yes, if law enforcement has evidence that someone on your site is using your app in a malicious way, then I can understand that, one, US law is not global law, so different countries are going to have different laws for how these things apply, and our definitions of freedom of speech and other things are not global, so there's degrees of this. But it's this weird balancing act of, like, yes, it's good. Korea wants to crack down on the young women being abused in some of these cases, and France is partnering in doing some of that. But if it was Putin trying to crack down on people who are anti-Putin, if it was Iran cracking down on any number of things you're not allowed to be in Iran, it's this weird balancing act of, like, sometimes my answer is the government, and sometimes my answer is like, yeah, you guys are doing bad things. Of course the government should crack down on you. And it's this if it's illegal to use Telegram for X purpose in France, and it's illegal to use Telegram in X purpose in Russia, Telegram's ability to say, well, I don't like France, I'm supportive of, child pornography is terrible, I'm going to support France, but being gay is okay, so I'm not going to support Russia, that puts Telegram in a weird legal position of, sometimes you follow countries' laws and sometimes you don't. I don't want technology companies to feel like they get to be extrajudicial. And so, like, I feel like an ass saying somehow Telegram should not help law enforcement crack down on child pornography. Of course they should. Of course they should. But do I get to draw the line because I decide that being gay is okay in Russia? It sucks. I don't like it. Telegram shouldn't exist, I think.
And that's why I say, it's terrible to say, it depends what type of person someone is. But like
Right.
in that region of the world, as long as Telegram's stance is the same no matter what country they're in, which I find hard to believe.
I mean, that's the thing. That's the same thing with Twitter, where Twitter's position can claim to be free speech absolutists. They absolutely cave to governments who are right wing and that they agree with. So, like, this is the problem. It's never that way. It's entirely dependent on, if Pavel Durov had been asked by Putin and he's the wrong type of Russian and he's a pro-Putin Russian, do you think Telegram would have agreed and handed over records? Probably.
Absolutely,
so it sucks.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm on Telegram's side, providing that there's a consistency and they're saying F you to all governments in all countries.
But that sucks for the people using Telegram to do child pornography and human trafficking.
Yeah, but it's similar. I know you're going to call me out on this one. It's kind of, again, it's like the gun argument, right? Like, is the gun dangerous or is it the person with the gun, right? And Telegram in itself is not dangerous. There's nothing about it where you're like, wow, this is great for pornography of children. You don't log in there and it's like, hey, all of these cool features help you do child pornography. It's kind of just like, hey, all of these features make it very difficult for anybody to hack in, steal, and then, it makes very difficult to track. So it's an abuse of the system, right?
But that is why gun control is designed not to take away the gun, but to moderate how the gun is used.
Yeah.
And so in this situation, it is people seeking for a way to say, let's let Telegram be a safe place for good stuff, but why do we allow it to be a bad place for bad stuff?
Yeah, I'm torn on this one. I'm torn on this one. Like, not ethically. I'm not ethically torn.
No, it's a weird, like, I don't know how to get myself out of the, like, catch-22 of, I get to decide that being gay in Iran is okay, so therefore they should ignore the Iran legal requests. But obviously child pornography is bad, and I'd like it if we had a worldwide system in which we all agreed what was good and bad. But this is why I come back to, and the problem is I can say, great, tomorrow you should shut down Telegram because it is unable to balance those two things, but tomorrow someone will just create Telegram too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an interesting quote in a terrible movie, and I always think of it when I'm caught in this dilemma, and it's like it doesn't answer the dilemma, but it makes me think that we're looking at it the wrong way. And the quote was it was Antitrust, I think the movie was. The problem's
Mhm.
not in the band, it's in the bandwidth. And again, it doesn't relate to this problem, but it always makes me think we're looking at the problem in the wrong way. We're trying to solve this problem on Telegram, but we should be trying to solve the problem somewhere else. And I don't know where else. Like it's not something I think about. It's not one of those business
Right.
interests that I have solving. But I do feel like you just said, Telegram goes away, Telegram 2 pops up. Same problem, newer versions of Crypt, right? Like
Right.
it will never change, right? Unless enough government sort of step in and say these types of applications are done, which is sort of robbing the world of safe communications, right? Where it's like,
That's
well,
the thing is I don't know how to balance all of the things where I want people to have their communication protected from crappy governments. And if the answer is no one gets their communication protected from any government, that also sucks a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. And even to the other point of I was arguing with someone on Twitter about this the other day. I guarantee you LAPD has gone after liberal elected people in LA because they don't like that they want to hold the LAPD accountable. If tomorrow LAPD showed up to Telegram with a screenshot claiming I have proof that one of my liberal city councilors is, doing something bad, the chances that LAPD fabricated that pretty fucking high actually. So the trust that I have in any of these government institutions to come to Telegram and say trust us, we decrypted it because we snuck into the thing and got proof of it. How is Telegram supposed to justify to prove that other than they would have to join the group too, and the group isn't just going to be like, oh sure, I'll let the Telegram bot into my secret illegal child porn ring conversation. So there's so many situations in which the end-to-end encryption just fundamentally destroys trust and therefore destroys anybody's ability to moderate and balance this kind of stuff. And I don't want the answer to be you just have to let the child porn go so that the women in Saudi Arabia can talk to one another. Like that sucks too. It feels like I have no good choices in front of me and I hate it.
yeah, it's definitely that's why I call it. It's sort of I know you'll bleep me out for this, so I can say it. It's like a trifle, like
Right? No, it's good and then crap and then good and then
yeah.
crap and then good and yeah.
And that's how I feel like everything these days. Like one of the interesting things about American politics is it's a shit trifle because when you actually, if you sit down and talk to somebody sensibly for 2 hours, you actually find like, okay, they're a little bit of this and they're a little bit of that and they're a little bit of this, but then they communicated this to me and that suggests like an open door to a different type of thinking that's not, traditional from that type of from that party. It really is a shit trifle, right? Because for example, not that I'm going to bash on my own party, but the ethical and moral dilemma of being pro-Trump for me is still something I can never get over as a person who's also a person of faith. I'm thinking to myself, the two things are in complete conflict always, right? I can't claim to be a person of faith and then also look at this person and say, well, that's okay, right? Like
The guy who calls it 2 Corinthians is definitely on your side, knows what he's talking about.
yeah, so yeah, it's just a weird shit trifle everywhere, and this is just
Yeah.
another thing that I get up and say, yeah, there's no solution because I don't want them to. And by the way, this is not because I don't trust the government or on like I always because my view is like no smoke, no fire, right? Like if the LAPD is showing up with a screenshot, you probably did something wrong, right? You probably no,
Nope.
nope,
A
okay.
cab.
So I'm not worried about that. I just feel like again, it's that we're looking in the wrong place for these solutions and we're holding the wrong guys accountable. Because if I'm this guy, I'm saying, well, why is the internet not accountable? My app runs in the cloud in the internet. Like, why are the architects of the internet getting away with this, right? And then not everybody else below is held accountable. Like, hey, we're a cloud, we have a data center, so we have an obligation to make sure this it's not on our servers. But I feel like I shouldn't say they're less, but it's guys like Durov who make the news because they're at the Telegram level, right? Where it's like, well, yeah,
I mean, because they're the ones who decided to enable the end-to-end encryption capability and then not give themselves a way to moderate it.
and that's what I'm getting at with like the problem's not in the band, the problem's in the bandwidth. Like I think the problem can be correctly filtered out somewhere else so that people, when they do create Telegram 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, will catch it somewhere else. I do think we've got to
I don't
look
know. That's
somewhere
my
else.
concern is end-to-end encryption defeats all of this always, and I don't like either path.
Let me propose like, again, as a solution, again, it's harsh, but there's certain things I can do on the internet with a high credit score, and there's certain things I cannot do on the internet with a high credit score.
Yeah, but who gets to decide? We come back to who gets
I
to decide what the
know, I
definition of the high credit
know,
score is, because the
I
Russian
know,
credit score is going to be different than the
I
Japanese credit score, which is different than the
I know,
Iranian credit score, which is
I
different than the British credit score.
I know. That bit needs to be figured out, but it still moves the problem, which is if you can't be a decent human being, you can't. It's sort of Black Mirror, right? Like, the episode, you've seen
Yeah,
Black Mirror,
that's
right?
the problem.
The
Yeah.
episode where they block everybody else out and all you can
Yeah.
see is
You turn
nothing and
static. Yeah. Yeah.
that needs to be a real thing in the future for people. Is if you
But
can't behave on the island, you can't be on the island.
in this situation, though, we don't know that they don't deserve to be on the island until we decrypt their messages.
Yeah. How we figure
Yeah.
out they don't belong on the island requires a lot of people trusting the government a lot more.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. It's never ended
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Giving up privacy has its advantages for society.
Never has, ever once. Yeah. All right. The next story is a TechCrunch article summarizing the state of 2024 data breaches. And as of August 12th, there have been over 1 billion records, 1 billion with a B records stolen. And that's only what? August is 7/12ths of the way through the year. That's a terrible piece of math. But yeah, we have a lot more of your records are about to get stolen. And the list of companies, this isn't like Joe's startup who screwed up and forgot to set the MongoDB password. These are massive companies getting screwed by this.
Yeah, and it's a weird one too, right? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, is any solution now worthwhile because they've lost so much data at this point? Like
Who do you trust?
the hackers are like, I can get it somewhere, right? Like it's already out there. It's like,
Right.
But again, this is another one of those. The problems, the problem's not in the band; it's in the bandwidth. It's like I've got to assume at this point now, with all of this amazing cyber tech that we have, we're just not going to get any better at this for the time being. And again, it's sort of a race against time, right? Because I don't get a replacement social security number. I
Right.
do get a new credit card number when they steal it, but I don't get a new social security number. There's a lot of numbers I don't get. So
Yep.
if my social security number is out there,
You're done.
who gives a shit, right? Like
Right.
no future solution is going to help me. Somebody has my social. So yeah, it's a weird one where I'm like, do I spend any time thinking about how to solve this one because it's a waste of time? But I'm also, yeah, I also when I am thinking about it, I still go back to that. Is there really just one, not one, literally one? It'd have to be distributed but is there a data vault that is we hold your data? We are the global bank.
Until that person gets hacked.
No, I
mean,
know. But that truly has to be. We're going to focus all of our energy, everybody, on securing that data there. Like we've solved the problem of not getting hacked, but the data all lives there, and other companies, via clean rooms of the future. Access that data. I know. Because it seems like distributing the data and letting everybody have their own versions of it.
Yes, that part's bad. Yes,
It-
absolutely. Right.
Just can it ever really get better? Because there are new companies popping up all the time, and the tech gets better, but the humans don't get better necessarily, right? So
Well, that's the thing is the reasons these are happening. So like AT&T lost 73 million customer records and we still don't know why. They won't actually confirm that it's
Right.
happened, but all security experts have found the hacked AT&T data and know it happened, but AT&T won't tell us how. Snowflake had a situation where like 30 users didn't have two-factor authentication turned on, and so AT&T, Ticketmaster, Santander Bank, LendingTree, 110 million accounts were compromised on AT&T because Snowflake got hacked by like 30 people not having two-factor authentication turned on. Like, Snowflake's massive. These companies are massive. Yeah, some of the small ones. What's one of the ones in here? The Illinois voter data information. I can see that getting hacked. The UK Electoral Commission. Sorry to your Brit friends. Of course, the 14 guys in a Windows, Microsoft DOS office lost the UK Electoral Commission data. But, like, some of these are massive companies.
yeah, big companies.
But I think this is the problem is, like, you're right. It's bad that we've distributed all of our
Yeah.
personal data to so many different companies. But the problem is a central vault company is now an even worse central point of failure for the hackers to get into.
Yeah, it is. It is in the current climate, but I think this is similar to my idealistic views as a kid, right? Where I'm like, well, if we weren't so busy starting wars and we were like pooling our money into science and medicine, this planet has a chance, right? Which is the idea.
I mean, hackers are the equivalent of the gang, who are like, I mean, not all hackers. I suppose there's plenty of rich hackers, but like, if poverty wasn't an issue, if there was a bunch of things that were taken care of, then you wouldn't need people to try and hold a hospital system hostage for $5 million. I mean, that's probably not true. That might not be true. Hackers seem like assholes just for the sake of proving that they can do a thing and they get money out of it. There's always going to be people who just want money. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, there is no code in the hacking world, right? There's no
right,
creed, which is like I don't believe that 95% of hackers are looking at the 5% saying they give us a bad name, right? I
right.
think it's the scammers figured out the intelligence scammers figured out how to take that next step and became hackers, right? Like, yeah.
Sure,
So to me, it's like Mad Max. They're just walking through the desolate wasteland, murdering and pillaging and taking whatever they can and ransom,
right.
right? But I do feel like and it won't happen, not in our lifetime, because countries can't even
No.
agree on the color of the sky, right? But I do believe we need to start taking more of a global approach to pooling resources and tech to saying like these are problems, like they're real problems.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think the blockchain is the solution for healthcare data because it's a public ledger and people shouldn't have to have their health information on the public ledger. But I do appreciate that somebody's trying to think about, like, okay, I shouldn't be giving out all of my information to people. I don't know if end-to-end encryption is actually a thing that you could figure out. Like, I give my health insurance somebody the end-to-end encryption connection for 30 seconds to validate the thing, and then I yank it back and they never actually got the data. I don't know. There's got to be some solution where I'm the person in charge of my data and you don't get to store it in a database somewhere. If you need to use it to do something, then the government should be saying I mean, this is a problem. Every time you come up with something new, a hacker's going to find the next thing, which is hackers already started figuring out I didn't get access to the data at rest, so I had to start looking at the data in transit and I just monitored the stream. And I don't know if the stream's encrypted. Can you break the encryption? Is the issue data at rest and that's not encrypted? I don't like somebody somewhere has to be putting in controls and requirements, and if there's some degree of personal ownership, but I don't know if you can't afford the device, then why do you not get to get treated at the ER? Like, there's a bunch of bad parts of that too. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'll put my sci-fi hat on again, right? Like in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, well, what if I was the read-only data? What if the data was like, what if I was the card? What if I was the drive? What if my data is encoded to me? I'm read-only, so I'm not hackable, right? Like, I think again, we have to look at the problem. Like the current medium is hackable, and maybe the future is
Right.
it's not. We've got to stop looking at media the same way, a medium the same way, right? We've got to stop saying, well, it's a drive on a remote server, and we've got to say, nah, that's the old world. That's how we used to start. Like we say data, like, even that, is it data in the future? It needs to, I feel like it needs to go through an evolution, like like a complete evolution.
Yeah, and I guess my concern is this is the same conversation we were having with was it security when we were talking about the CrowdStrike
Yeah.
issue? All you move the security, and so now everything happens in the virtualized space and you can't get to anything until the hackers figure out how to hack the virtual machine, and now you need the exact same thing in the virtual machine. You figure out how to do end-to-end encryption and the data is never allowed to be at rest. It always can only be streaming from you to the provider and back. But then the hackers will just figure out how to decrypt the thing in the stream, or someone will forget to, that's one of those weird things is like, I don't know what I want my answer to be. Do I want governments around the world to say you will be put out of business by the government unless you can show me that you are never storing data at rest? And as soon as we find, and how do you verify that? Does the government of France get to go and log into everyone's data center and scan all of your equipment and make sure that you aren't storing data at rest? Like, how do you enforce this also?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one to explain, but in my mind, I'll try to my best to explain it without giving it too much thought of how you would do this technically. But
Sure.
I've been fascinated for years about images, right? Like images, like data as image. And I think to myself, like, wow, it'd be really cool if my data was stored in an image that only means something to me, right? Like it's the lens that I see it through, which is the decryption or the unencrypted data, right? Like that's what they need. They need to, when they hack and get the data, they're trying to get the raw text version, right? So they
Sure.
can just read it. So the lens is broken, right? Like the fact that it's like, well, once I figured out the lens and I see this, like anybody can read it. I think of it differently in the future. In my mind, I'm thinking, what if there's only one lens? Like, obviously, you've got to solve the problem of, well, like there's a million companies that need
They
my
can then
data, right? But
right.
but yeah, it just to me, it's like the problems in the lens of how we see the data.
And that's where, if you could figure, the problem I have is, okay, great. So everybody, just like they get a social security number, they get a private encryption key. And that is the thing that you must like scan the thumbprint at the doctor's office. And that's the thing that allows the encryption key to be shared for 30 seconds, never at rest, only in transit to do the whatever, whatever. But that has a cost. So are we giving those away for free? Does everybody get a little device from birth? Who's maintaining the software and the upgrade of those things? Like, I'm not disagreeing with the concept. I worry about the implementation, and it turns into Elysium, where only 3 million rich people are allowed to have their data
Yeah.
be secure, and the other 6 billion of us get screwed.
So we wouldn't. That would be a journey, though, right? Like the perfect version where it's like, yeah, but who pays for the software at birth and the upgrades and all that kind of stuff?
Right.
That's like one of the destinations. That's like a version. They call it version 2. But in the meantime, if we start to analyze the problem in a different way, this is why I always think of that quote: "The problem's not
Oh,
advanced
fully.
bandwidth."
Start building the version of that tech now so that you at least have the plumbing in
It's like
place.
this
Yeah.
too. I think of it like this all the time. Like there's a lot to be said for understanding the brain waves, right? Like, will we ever get to the point where you can show me a photograph and predict my reaction to it? You show me a photograph.
You show me Pennywise the Clown, and you know my adrenaline is going to spike.
Absolutely. I guess that's what I'm looking at. I'm thinking to myself, like, it's the lens that we see the data where there's only one person in the world who's going to look at that picture and say, oh, I need to do this on it.
Do you remember, did you ever have a Windows 8 device?
No, I don't think so.
So in Windows 8, they introduced a new type of lock screen, and you would pick an image, and then you had to draw on the image, and you would draw on the image in only the way that you would have drawn on the image, and it would unlock the device. The problem was everyone forgot how they drew on the image, because it's not actually a unique gesture, it's a brain chemistry process.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I didn't know that existed. But that's
Yeah.
how I think about the future. I think the more we can give up consciously, I'm putting in a password, right? Like, because I'm a
Right.
techie and I still at times are like, okay, you get your habits, right? And I feel like, yeah, we got to take that next step where it's sort of just brainwaves, where it's like I become predictable, but I'm the lens, right? And
Right.
there are not 10,000 companies out there that have my lens.
In the meantime, people should be aware, AT&T, 73 million records, Change Healthcare, they don't tell you how many medical records were stolen from people, but it's a substantial portion of the entire American populace, apparently. Synovus had 300 million patient interaction records, which doesn't necessarily mean 300 million people. Ticketmaster, 560 million records, again, not people, could be transactions and ticket purchases. Cencora, 1.5 million patient records. UK Electoral Commission had 40 million voter records stolen, which I think is the entire population of the UK. Illinois voter data in a contractor's unsecured database. Illinois allowed a contractor to have 12 or 13 databases that didn't have a password set. So this is the problem with letting states and states' rights get in the way of actual implementation of things. So yeah, just be aware that your data is almost certainly in a database somewhere at this point. Like, your chances of not having been hacked are probably pretty low.
Yeah.
Happy ending to that story.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah, I love the challenge of thinking of the paradigm, like the new paradigm, right? Like
Yeah.
my
It would be
data,
really interesting.
my data is a flower, and the minute you pick it, it's dead, right? The minute
Right,
you steal
exactly.
my data, it dies. It's organic, right? Like it's gone. So hackers, cool. Enjoy the ashes that you now have that used to be data, because the minute you took it, it died. It's a weird
Right.
challenge, but we got to move because these data breaches are just getting.
Right, this is just till it's a billion records just up until August.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and it's getting worse every
And
year.
eventually they'll get to me on the list, right? I'm a G. So if it's surname
Exactly.
first,
I'm at you. I'm
oh,
good. I'm good until like
you're
2030.
yeah, you're good at, like, they're not gonna get to you in this lifetime. So, but I'm
Right. Yeah.
cheating. I'm getting worried.
All right, the next story is coming out of Computer World, and the title is The Workers Have Spoken, They're Staying Home. And it's talking about post-COVID, the transition to remote work, and the number of companies trying to get people back into the office. A quote from the article, according to a recent Gartner report, 48% of employees say their company's mandates prioritize what leaders want rather than what employees need to do good work. According to the latest Moody's commercial real estate analysis, office vacancy rates have never been higher. Just over 1 in 5 offices is now vacant. And the only reason that percentage isn't higher is that companies have yet to be able to get out of their long-term leases. They're expecting it to get much worse. I thought there was a fascinating part of this story, which was Dell threatened people and said, you're not going to get a promotion if you don't return to, at least 3 days in the office. And most of the Dell employees were like, cool, I don't need a promotion. Thanks. Which, yeah, of course they don't. Companies, like employees in technology for the past 2 decades have conditioned themselves to not expect any increase in their current job. You get a pay raise by quitting and going to another company and telling that company you're worth 20,000 more. So of course Dell's gambit to do all of this didn't work. And yeah, I have zero sympathy for landlords and companies who want to get people back into the office. I know you miss being around people and in the office. We've talked about remote work and the pros and cons, but yeah, sorry guys, the world's moved on. We can find ways to make people like you happier and get more interactions, but it's good actually that you and I live on quite literally the most opposite end of the country you can go. We are the true north, south, east-west diagonal across this country, and we get to work together in a way that we wouldn't if the companies we worked at required us to be in the office. So I don't know. I have very little sympathy for this one. It's a better world because of it.
Yeah, I might have shifted. I might have shifted my opinions of it more recently, maybe over the last 2 to 3 months, and some of that is just being better mental health, right? Like just
Sure.
taking care of myself better, eating better, like exercise, get out, like so. I probably shifted my attitude a little bit on this, where I still miss the moments at the whiteboard with 5
Yes.
engineers figuring something out.
I think, but that's the thing is that it's boggling to me is you no longer have to pay rent and electricity and a bunch of things that went into the office. You should be paying for once every 2 or 3 months. You get 10 people into a room for 2 days and let them do all that kind of stuff. The cost of that is going to even out and you could still get the benefit. You don't need daily whiteboarding sessions. Like you could figure out the right pace and cadence depending on the types of jobs. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting though too. Like we talked about this like in a really early episode, like what it does to the cities, what it does because it's a weird one, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it changes the amount of water that is used in the city versus the
Right.
suburbs, and it just changes the dynamics of everything that we won't fully understand for decades, right?
And like pollution was down for the first year
Right,
of COVID,
right.
right? Because no one was in their cars going anywhere.
Yeah, and as somebody who did the 2 hour commute into Boston for years,
Ugh, yeah, I don't know how you did that.
every 5 or 6 days I lost a day of my life because
Right.
I was in a car or a train for 4 hours a day. I will never miss that. Never.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because does it lead to another? Is there going to be a problem at some point where it's the government steps in and there's a bailout? But it's like, cool, that fixes things temporarily. But like,
Right.
do we not just need to consolidate all these guys into less buildings, and those buildings are now what we're going to take them down? Like,
Those buildings can now be the affordable housing we don't have right now.
you
Yeah.
see, look at you. You just immediately gave it away to the.
To the liberal priority of giving people shelter. Yeah, a fundamental human right.
They've got a better apartment than me, even though I worked really hard for it.
Yeah.
Where's my handout?
It's called equity.
Where's my bloody handout? I'm still waiting for my handout.
Your bloody handout was being born straight and white.
Yeah, I do actually remind my kids of that all the time. I was like, look, let's do the math. You were born free, sort of free, right?
Yeah.
You were born not discriminated against, right?
Yep.
Like,
Except for your daughter. Your daughter's going to get 78 cents on the dollar, but yeah.
she's going off planet anyway. She's going to be on an all-female crew to Mars. That is the
Amazing.
first crew to colonize Mars. So that's where
They've done studies and they've talked about the risk of sending mixed gender straight people on Mars missions and the likelihood that they'll hook up and have a baby and that's bad. And so they've literally had to look at, should we send like a bunch of lesbians or gay dudes as as the mission to Mars because it reduces the risk of what could actually happen. Yeah.
Well, there's a line in one of the Marvel movies where she says they just get right up on in there and cut it all out, right? So they could just do that,
Wow.
but
That's an unfortunate requirement to be an astronaut.
yeah, but I mean, if you're an astronaut, the sacrifices that you're willing to take to go off planet, right? Like,
At least one of them was willing to drive 14 hours in a diaper, so.
oh God, I can't believe I remember that story. Yeah, um, yeah, she did. But yeah, what NASA have to figure out is how to secretly make sure that when the all-female crew gets to Mars, that when they're
They don't found the next Amazon race of warrior women who don't let
exactly.
men in.
Yeah.
Right.
We just like cool. Let women have their own planet, and let's see if they just do a better job on their own without
Right.
us. So
Well, speaking of NASA making terrible decisions, the next story is NASA and Boeing denying that the Starliner crew is stranded. This is an old article headline because now they have admitted that they're going to be up there for until what, February? NASA and Boeing have fully bungled this Starliner launch. They had 2 crew members who went up. There was a problem with the Starliner module. They can't come back down. What was going to be a couple of days turned into a couple of weeks, turned into 2 months. It's now February when the next SpaceX module is going to go up there. And good, we get Elon to be our knight in shining armor. And so as of July, Boeing had lost $1.6 billion on their inability to make not a space shuttle, but a crew transport system for NASA. And I don't know, man, NASA, Boeing, neither of them have a very good track record right now. I don't love that SpaceX comes out on top of all of this because Elon deserves zero credit for anything ever. And most of the SpaceX success has nothing to do with him. But it is wild that we privatized space and gave Boeing billions of dollars, and Boeing doesn't know what to do. I think there might be an entire episode for us here of just the disasters of Boeing in the past since the McDonnell Douglas executive team took over, and the 737 MAX disaster, the number of planes falling apart right now because Boeing doesn't know how to build and maintain planes anymore, the Starliner. It's a disaster. I don't understand. It's not good, guys.
yeah, firstly, Elon, if you're listening, I may not agree with you on a lot of things, but thank you, Elon.
Thumbs up to SpaceX,
Thumbs up to
privatizing
SpaceX.
and
Yes.
ruining our ability. Although I read a thing on Blue Sky the other day that apparently there's a book I want to go read about the space shuttle program. How actually the fact that only 2 of them exploded is like exactly what the engineers in the 70s predicted would be the failure rate. They thought it'd be 1 in 64, and they had 128 missions. And the fact that the thing was the concept of reusability and all of that is laudable, but was never actually achieved. And I don't know. There's an interesting history that maybe NASA's been screwing up since the moon landing and has just had aside from Challenger and Columbia, horrible disasters. But PR wise, NASA has done a relatively good job, other than calculating meters versus feet and crashing into Mars. All things considered, I don't think the perception of NASA is that bad, and maybe it should be.
Yeah, it's a weird one for me because it's not quite being desensitized. It's sort of switching up, and there's a lot of shows and documentaries sort of make reference to this, right? Like they had to remain appealing to the American public, right? Because when people stopped tuning in, that was a problem, right? Like the funding would
Right.
dry up, and I wonder if they are unfairly treated. And my point here is that when you consider the magnitude of what they're doing, right? Like it's become normal for us to think, oh, well, they're just leaving the planet and they're just floating around like not far off the planet. And I'm like,
Right.
that is insanely hard to do.
The ISS is flying at like 96,000 miles an hour or something
Yeah.
insane. The fact that we get that to ever dock with another
Yeah.
spaceship is wild.
Every moment they're up there is
Right.
wild.
Minutes away from disaster.
Yeah, but we've got so used to it being up there now and hearing it, it's kind of like lost its magic. But it is magic. It's like the only magic that we've really created. Like,
And what's great about it is it's like really cool math. And the math is never wrong. It's the people implementing the math that can screw it up. And they can do the one faulty pipe that got provided by 3 contracted companies removed from NASA who cut corners on QA and no one noticed it. But the actual people who are figuring out how to use gravity to slingshot a little thing around Jupiter and hit the moon orbiting Saturn another 40 million miles away at exactly the right angle to not crash, but to use its gravity to, like, the math required is so precise and so impressive, and then they're let down by the people who actually have to build the hardware sometimes. That's got to be wildly frustrating, except for the one guy who screwed up meters to feet and crashed directly into Mars. But other than that.
Yeah. So and this one I'm torn on because Boeing is a whole conversation, right?
I think we should have a whole episode digging into ever since the McDonnell-Douglas merger, it's been a disaster.
But this is interesting to me because this is the moment they caught it, right? Like this is the time they got it somewhat right. The fact that something went wrong.
I mean, right, it's better than the 737 Maxes falling out of the sky and killing hundreds of people. Right, they caught it before the 2 people burned up on that reentry.
Right, exactly. So we lost astronauts in 2 disasters, Columbia and Challenger, and this time they caught it. It's a little drastic, where it's like they're going from 8 days to 8 months, but
Right.
but it's also the first time we've been in this situation where you know, when you
Sure.
think about Columbia, you think to yourself like, wow, what if they'd figured out right away that was going to be a problem? How long
Right.
would those astronauts have been up there stuck? And then
Right.
how would they have repaired it? Like, do they have spare parts? Like, you know, so we don't know. Like in your mind, you're like, oh yeah, probably would have. They'll run out of food, so they got to get they got
Right.
2 weeks, and then they got to get back. So this one, it's like it's a little bit shocking to see like 8 days to 8 months. But I'm also like, for the NASA guys, that's probably like, well, yeah. I mean, what did you think?
Yeah,
It was gonna be
absolutely.
2
8
weeks?
months is worth their lives. Absolutely. No doubt.
So something went wrong, and that bit we'll have to figure out.
But how many have you, like, I don't know how often you're actually on Twitter, but it does feel like once a week there's footage on TikTok that then gets shared on Twitter of a Boeing something or other. Like a guy just got killed, a Delta worker just got killed because a tire exploded. The number of Boeing planes that just like randomly fall apart feels like it's bigger. Now, this might be confirmation bias. It might be that we're just more aware of Boeing now, and so what normally is just run-of-the-mill crap that happens with a 15-year-old plane, and usually we never hear about it, maybe it's just getting more publicity, but the perception of Boeing right now is not good.
It's not good, and I don't know all the details of all the newest cases, but again, where I might give them the benefit of the doubt here is it's similar to my feeling about processed food, right? Like, is this just the amount of time before you hit that first generation of maintenance issues, right? Because I don't know the age of a lot of these plans, and so do we need to start correctly categorizing all of the problems, right? It's like, well, actually, Boeing are getting a bad rap, but 60% is because this is the life. This is the life of a plane needs to be adjusted to be this, not this, right? Like,
Right, but that's what I'm saying is like there's absolutely the possibility that there's a perception issue, which is normally McDonnell Douglas plane or a Airbus plane after 10 years, absolutely 1 in every 1,000 flights, crappy thing falls off and no
Yeah.
one knows about it because it's just the run of the business and it never results in a crash and it's just the thing. And we might be getting confirmation bias that now anytime it's a Boeing plane, we're like, oh, it's a thing going on. I will say though, the 737 Max was brand new. The Starliner is brand new. The Dreamliner is brand new. I mean, we can't say Boeing killed the whistleblower who tried to go and warn them about all of these things on these new planes, but the whistleblower conveniently died before could talk about all of the things that he saw in Boeing about these new planes. So you can say that yes, there might be part of this that there's confirmation bias, but there's a significant part of this which is current Boeing manufacturing process is fundamentally broken.
yeah. I agree. I don't want to sound like I'm siding with Boeing.
We should be clear-eyed about what's going on and not necessarily saying Boeing is 100% crap, but they're at least 50% crap.
Yeah. And how many companies are there compared to the automobile industry where it's great, right? It's like, hey, we need to recall your car because there's a chance there's gonna be a fire, right?
Right.
It's like we're recalling 60,000 vehicles, and the airplane industry sort of has their own version of that, right? But I feel like, yeah, Boeing's sort of dragging the aviation trust through the mud right now. But I still got to assume they're better and more trustworthy than automobile manufacturers, right? It's just more dramatic that
I don't
it's
know.
more dramatic, right? When a plane falls out of the sky, nobody wants to go that way, right? So in our minds, it's the worst thing in the world.
But the fact that it didn't used to be this way, that there used to be good controls, and that Boeing used to be better than
Yeah, yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah.
that's right. It doesn't matter whether it's more or less than other companies. They themselves have clearly declined.
Yeah, I
And absolutely today, air travel is still safer than driving in a car. Driving in a car is other human beings. It's actually not that often that it's Toyota or Tesla killing you, although Tesla's Cybertruck getting wet and catching on fire is wild and amazing because Elon's terrible. But more often than not, it's a human being behind the wheel that is the reason cars are more dangerous than planes.
and that's my point. I guess Boeing are getting they're rightfully getting wrapped right now for degrading of service, right? However, like I feel like they do have the right to look at everybody else and be like, "You're no better than us."
Yeah, but that's whataboutism. That doesn't matter. I don't care what your history was. I don't care how good you are compared to anything
I'm just
else.
saying, like, they're soaking up all of our attention on what is slipping by us, where we should be like, they should go up on the stand with Boeing, right? Because everybody's focused on Boeing right now, and I'm like,
Yeah, that's not how the world
eh,
works, though.
I know.
Yeah.
I just feel like we're piling it on. I do think the people dying is a little bit
That's
suspect.
it's not great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great because we're not easy to kill, right? Like,
We are weak little flesh bags that pop on
mm,
very easy circumstances. It's not intelligent design. An intelligent designer would have made us armadillos. They wouldn't have made us these weak little things.
as a guy who survived cancer, like I'm pretty hard. I'm pretty hard to kill. Like, I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of whistleblowers who keep dropping. I'm like, we're not that easy to kill, right? Like, all the whistleblowers
No, yeah,
disappear.
the whistleblowers dying is deeply concerning, and someone should be looking into that. It's like anybody who says anything against Putin accidentally falls out of their window all the time, and it's like that's no longer a coincidence.
Yeah, so I assume we're gonna see some execs leave Boeing at some point, right?
I mean, not unless they actually get held accountable by someone, because the stock market has no interest in ever holding an executive accountable. Executives get golden parachutes all the time. They're allowed to stick around. David Zaslav is fully ruined HBO, Warner Brothers, and Discovery, and no one cares because the shareholders are getting more value out of it. Like, no, capitalism today does not hold bad actors accountable ever.
See, I also feel like it's the one who gets caught that paves it helps everybody else out, right? Because
No, you arrest Sam Bankman-Fried and you claim that we've solved all of the problems with crypto, and then crypto's allowed to keep going. Sam Bankman-Fried was the little sacrificial goat that they all had to give up to let it to protect themselves.
I guess my point is going back to like you gotta have your credits, your chips in the bank, right? Which is what has Boeing done for humanity up until this point, right? They've got some credits on the table, right?
No, that's not
Yeah,
how it works.
yeah. I mean,
It's not how it
maybe
works.
it should work that way though. Maybe it
No,
should be
not at
like,
all. That's how monopolies operate, and that's how you get Internet Explorer 6. Because you sit on your laurels and you don't do anything and you're allowed to just coast. And no, the history is a lesson, it is not credit.
I'm not saying they get a pass. I just also, and I'm just looking at Boeing and I'm saying like they're getting a lot of flack right now, but I do think, and I shouldn't say it's been blown out of proportion because there are victims who died, right? Like I'm just saying,
I think it should work in the other direction, which is the better you used to be and the crappier you now are, the worse it is for you. Because you clearly knew what was right and what worked for you, and you chose to stop doing that. Versus a Sam Bankman-Fried who was like, I'm inventing a new thing. No one's ever heard of me. I'm going to go and do these crazy, ridiculous scams and take advantage of this brand new technology. That guy had zero credit, so he deserves to be punished, but the scope of his bad action is not it. He started at 0 and went to -50. Boeing started at 300 and went to -50. So Sam Bankman-Fried's tally is -50. Boeing's tally is -350. Boeing deserves more punishment and more impact as a result of that.
yeah. I guess this is not related. It's not whataboutism because I'm not
Yeah.
relating the two. I'm just saying everybody sucks, right? Like I'm with House. Everybody lies and everybody sucks, right? So there's like a million other people by default when you wake up in the morning who are doing shittier things. Like I'm not reducing what they've done. But when does everybody else go up on the block?
Right. No, I agree that I wish the federal government were bigger and was holding more people accountable for their bad actions. I'm glad you're on board with my liberal policies.
Yeah, just don't touch finance. Just leave finance alone, right?
Leave finance, the worst offenders.
They are, but they're sort of like the tip of the spear. They're the ones who break through all the walls for us, and then we follow
No.
after. Yes.
They're the ones who caused the housing crisis and the financial crisis.
Mm.
All right, the next story. I like to know that Google was listening to our episode about digital friction and wanted to figure out how to help it because this ridiculous new feature that so Google is working on a new version of Android and there's a new feature called Collections. And according to the article, with a tap, users will be able to launch a full screen immersive experience that highlights and arranges the most important content from their installed apps. And basically, you have a million apps sending you a million notifications, and their solution is not to try to actually figure out what to do about all of that. It's to give you a shiny new screen that shows you all of those notifications somehow better. It is a wild choice by Google to not try to figure out what to do about the root cause and just to kind of put a band-aid on the symptom.
This makes me think of, when you see a bad TV commercial and you're like, someone got paid loads of money for that, right?
Yep.
It's like,
There's a lot of people who got paid for
yeah,
this
yeah,
really bad
yeah.
idea.
It's like there's a hockey team. I think it's like the LA. Is it the LA Kings? The hockey team out of LA. Give me a second. Let me check. LA Kings.
I would not know.
NHL. And it's funny because I think it's the LA Kings. Yeah. Maybe it's not that bad. Anyway, somebody just redid their logo, and I was like, "You're kidding me, right? Like, how much did somebody get paid for that? Like, it would have taken me a weekend of work,
Right.
But somebody probably got like $5 million for that, and they're all talking online about how amazing it is, and I'm like, holy shit, I could do that in GIMP in about like 12 hours work.
Yep.
Like in a weekend.
Do you watch? What's your like streaming device? Are you on a Roku? Are you on an Apple TV? Do you have Amazon Prime?
Yeah, I've got Amazon Prime, Apple TV, got everything.
Have you noticed the Amazon Prime logo in the last couple of months changed to the most weird generic font? The new font for that logo is the most weird, bland, generic font, and I'm like, absolutely, an entire marketing department spent 6 months figuring out what the new font should be for this logo, and it's trash. I don't understand. Also, did you know Kellogg's is no longer called Kellogg's? They rebranded to Kellanova because they needed to, I don't know, they decided that they wanted to keep the Kel. I mean, Kellogg's is based on a religious preacher who wanted you to eat really boring cereal to stop masturbating, so I'm fine ditching Kellogg as the brand, but it's a well-known brand, and for some reason they thought they should be called Kellanova. Anyway, branding is stupid and bad. I don't know, how did we get on this topic? Oh, because people are paid outrageous sums of money to do dumb things like Android's collections feature.
And I hope somebody at Google pulls this podcast out of the doldrums in a couple of years, and if we're right, because it sounds like you have no love for this either, right?
No.
I think is the dumbest idea I've heard in ages. Like, it just feels like when you talk about burning the planet, I always said this, right? Like, murders shouldn't just be about how you murdered, right? And how many you murdered. It should be about who you murdered, right? So if you murder somebody in my world with a high credit score, you get more time because you took out a decent.
My God.
You took out a decent person, right?
No.
So if you work at Google and you build this thing and it fails, the punishment should be an X10. Like, Google should be fined by an outside body, which is like, we all knew it was stupid. How did you not know?
And you poured the money into doing this instead of literally anything else.
Anything else. Like, I do not understand. It just feels like...
It is ridiculous. Yeah.
But it's also Google, though, and I got to assume, they're fairly scientific, right? I mean,
I will say, having tried to go through a Google product manager interview a decade ago, it was an insane process that they put people through to try to find people who can do this. But I don't know, man. This feels like one of those things where you have a real problem and the problem is too big for you to solve. And so you want the credit for trying to solve the problem, but you don't know how. I don't know.
Do you remember, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but this happens to me with Isabel all the time now. And it used to happen when I was a kid. You know, when you're coming up to holiday season and you see something and you say, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I like that. And then it ends up being a present because the person who's with you, oh, they must like this. I'm going to buy it for them.
Sure.
But then it's actually not something you ever really wanted. You're just like, it's interesting. So then now you're with somebody and now I'm with Isabel, when we're out, I'll see something and I'll say, "Oh, that's interesting," but please don't buy me it for Christmas. Like I don't want it. I don't want it for my
Right.
birthday. I don't want it for Christmas. I just think it's interesting. I feel like this is that where like they talked to a couple of people and they were like, "Yeah, I've got this issue, and it'd be kind of nice if yada yada
Right.
yada." And then this really sort of gung ho get things done kind of product guy was like, "I'm gonna do this. Like I hear you," and it's like then we're all gonna get
But
it.
how did this get past the mock-up and user testing phase? What user was like, oh, good, my 4 million notifications are shiny now?
Yeah, it's horrible. I was actually annoyed at you for putting the story in the list. That's how bad the idea is. Like I was annoyed at you for finding it.
Nice. All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Acceptance Criteria. To read articles that we've written on similar topics to the ones we talk about here, head over to the blog at acceptancepod.com. You can also follow us on most apps. We're at acceptancepod. We'll post links to show notes and any articles from the blog over there. We're also building a community on Reddit at r/acceptancecriteria and on Discord. You can find links to both in the show notes and on the blog. And I promise we'll be moderating the crap out of them to keep it a nice little slice of the internet, unlike Twitter today. For now, I'm Kevin Thomas Euland, and you can find me on most apps at kthomaseuland. That's ULLAND.
And I'm Andrew Greener, and you can find me on most apps at Criteria Greener. That's GREINER. And this has been Acceptance Criteria. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you.